This wasn't the 1800s. This wasn't ancient history. This was all happening while people were watching TV, raising families, taking kids to school, living normal lives. In Ireland, thousands of women were locked inside religious institutions. Some were forced to work. Some had children taken from them. And some were buried in unmarked graves. The last of these places didn't close until 1996. They were called Magdalene Laundries and mother and baby homes, and for years what happened inside of them was kept hidden. Some stories were buried for a reason, and today we uncover them. And when the truth came out, it revealed something far bigger than anyone expected. This wasn't just one place. This wasn't just one institution. This was a system. A network of religious-run institutions that controlled the lives of thousands of women and children. On one side, the Magdalene Laundries. On the other, mother and baby homes. And many women were moved between the two. Once you entered this system, it was incredibly hard to get out of it. You could be sent there for being pregnant outside of wedlock. You could be sent there for being too flirtatious, too independent, or simply bringing shame on the family. Some were sent by priests. Some were sent by families. Some were sent by courts. And many of these women had no real say in what happened to them. They didn't commit crimes, but they were treated like they had. Inside the Magdalene Laundries, life was controlled. Women worked long hours doing laundry for businesses, hospitals, and other institutions. They weren't paid. They had very little freedom, and they lived under strict rules. Silence was often enforced. Punishments could come from small things, and over time, that would really wear somebody down. One survivor, Mary Norris, spent years inside a Magdalene laundry. She later spoke about the emotional toll of feeling like she didn't belong in the outside world. She described the work as constant. The silence was overwhelming, and the feeling that her life had been completely taken from her. Another survivor, Mary Smith, was sent there as a teenager. She described how quickly everything changed. One moment she was living her life, and the next moment she was in an institution being completely controlled. She worked long hours, and like many others, unpaid. And just like many others, she didn't know when she would be allowed to leave. These weren't criminals, and they were being treated like they didn't deserve freedom. For decades, What happened inside these laundries was hidden. Then, in 1993, something happened that changed everything. At a former Magdalene laundry site in Dublin, a mass grave was uncovered. Inside, the remains of 155 women were found. Some had names, some did not, and for others, records didn't match. These were all women who had lived and worked inside the laundry. These were all women who had just been forgotten. They were buried without identification, without dignity, and in some cases, without their identities being fully known. And that discovery raised a question. How many more stories like this were still hidden? And as people started asking questions, it became clear that this wasn't just about the laundries. Because for many women, their story started somewhere else. Their story started when they became pregnant. Mother and baby homes were institutions that pregnant women would get sent to. They'd be sent there to have their baby. Often, this was done all in secrecy. Many were forced to stay there for months, forced to work, even while pregnant. Then things changed when their babies were born. One of the most well-known stories is that of Philomena Lee. As a young woman, she became pregnant and she was sent to a mother and baby home. After giving birth to her son, she was forced to give him up for adoption. He was taken from her. He was sent abroad, and she spent years and years trying to find him. Her story became widely known, but it represents something that happened to thousands of women. Many children born in these homes were adopted. Some were sent overseas, many without permission. And in many cases, the records were incomplete or missing. For the mothers, that meant a lifetime of not knowing. For years, people believed that the truth was finally coming out. But then, another discovery shocked the country. In 2014, historian Catherine Corless began investigating a mother and baby home in Tuam. She uncovered records showing that hundreds of children had died there. Many burial records were completely missing. Then, in 2017, investigators confirmed that human remains had been found on the site. It's believed that hundreds of children were buried there in what appeared to be a disused underground structure. Not a cemetery, not a marked grave, but a place where their lives were never fully acknowledged. Now, by this point, the scale of the system became impossible to ignore. This wasn't just a few institutions. It was a culture of silence, of shame, and of control. As the full scale of this system became clear, a question arose again and again and again. Was anybody held accountable? For decades, these institutions operated in plain sight, run by religious leaders, connected to wider society, and yet very few people were ever held legally responsible. In 2013, the Irish government issued an official apology to the survivors. They acknowledged the suffering, the silence, and the role that the state had played. A compensation scheme was then introduced, with millions being paid to survivors. But for many, that wasn't enough. Because while apologies were made, money was being offered, there were very few criminal prosecutions. Religious orders who had run many of these institutions heavily criticised for not contributing enough, and they were heavily criticised for not fully accepting responsibility. And for the survivors, that left a difficult reality. That what had happened to them was acknowledged, but it wasn't punished. The last Magdalene laundry closed in 1996. Not centuries ago, not distant history, but within living memory. For decades, these stories were hidden. Behind walls, behind silence, and behind shame. But now, they are finally being told. And maybe the most chilling part, someone you pass in the street today could have lived through this system, and you'd never even know.